The Workplace Supervisor, a training platform. What you need to know. Where do you start and how do you proceed? Supervisor Health and Safety Awareness. An introduction. A supervisor is defined as anyone who has charge of a workplace or authority over a worker. That means not only those who have the title supervisor, but anyone having authority over another worker. This training session is designed to help you understand what your responsibilities and duties are with respect to a supervisory role. These are things you need to know and understand so that you and the people you supervise can be healthy and safe at work today and every day. It may all seem as big as the Matterhorn and as vast as the galaxy, but step by step you can understand and practice your legislated responsibilities and keep your workers safe. Supervisor Health and Safety Awareness. Everyone in the workplace, from the employer to the newest worker, has different but important duties to keep the workplace safe. Because employers have the most authority in the workplace, they have the greatest responsibility for health and safety. Supervisors are next in line. Since your job involves taking direction from your employer and giving direction to the workers you supervise, it's important for you to understand the health and safety responsibilities of everyone in the workplace, including yours. The focus of this training is on general awareness of rights and responsibilities under the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act W210 and regulation, and does not in any way replace the Act or regulation, its directives, or any other knowledge, information, or training you will receive as a supervisor. Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act, page 8. Duties of Supervisors. Every supervisor shall, so far as is reasonably practicable, take all precautions necessary to protect the safety and health of a worker under his or her supervision. Ensure that a worker under his or her supervision works in the manner and in accordance with the procedures and measures required by this Act or the regulations, and ensure that a worker under his or her supervision uses all devices and wears all clothing and personal protective equipment designated or provided by the employer or required to be used or worn by this Act or the regulations. B. Advise a worker under his or her supervision of all known or reasonably foreseeable risks to safety and health in the area where the worker is performing work. C. Cooperate with any other person exercising duty imposed by this Act or the regulations, and D. Comply with this Act and the regulations. Prevention. Preventing injuries and illnesses at work starts with the things you learn in this session, but it does not end here. Above and beyond what is covered in this training, your employer has a duty under the Act and regulation to make sure that you are competent before appointing you and to inform you of any hazards in the work which you supervise. Your presence here signifies that your employer believes you are competent to supervise his or her employees. It is hoped you will use what you learn here every day in your work as a supervisor so that you are more confident asking your employer questions about workplace health and safety and your duties. Step 1. Make a difference. Why the supervisor is so important. When a person is hired or promoted to the position of a supervisor, it usually means a pay raise. But it also means more responsibilities, including legal responsibilities relating to the health and safety of the workers under your supervision. It's a natural thing for a new supervisor to wonder if he or she is up to the challenge. In fact, asking yourself that question will help you figure out what additional information or instruction you might need to do your job well. People expect a lot from a supervisor, no matter how big or small the workplace. A healthy and safe workplace matters to everyone, and the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation expects supervisors to be the frontline guardians of healthy and safe workers, regardless of where workers perform the duties they are hired to complete. Every good employer also expects that from you, as do the people you supervise. A supervisor has to play a lot of different roles, often at the same time. Think about the different roles that people play on a basketball team. From the following list, which of the roles do you think apply to a supervisor's work? Coach, trainer, referee, cheerleader, captain? All of the above. Number 6 is correct. You will be called upon to play any and all of the above roles as you strive to keep your workplace healthy, safe, and productive. As a supervisor, you are a crucial part of your workplace's internal responsibility system. This is an extremely important concept for workplace health and safety, as you will learn throughout this training platform. The number of people who suffer a work-related illness or injury each year in Canada would fill the seats of dozens of large hockey arenas. New and young workers are 4 times more likely to get hurt during the first month on the job than at any other time. Often, they are not told about or do not understand the hazards of the job. They don't know what to expect from their employer and supervisor. Sometimes they aren't sure what questions to ask, and sometimes they don't even know who to ask. That's where you come in by having a proactive attitude and approach to supervising your workers and the work site. It's a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity to make a difference. Your duties as a supervisor. Under the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation, every supervisor is also considered to be a worker and has the same workplace duties and rights as a worker. But the Manitoba Act and Regulation also gives you specific duties related to your role as a supervisor, including telling workers about hazards, dangers, and responding to their concerns brought to your attention through the worker safety and health representative, showing workers how to work safely and making sure they follow the law and the workplace health and safety policies and procedures, making sure workers wear and use the right personal protective equipment, doing everything reasonable in the circumstances to protect workers from being hurt or getting a work-related illness. The supervisor is responsible to meet the standard of due diligence. This means all reasonable care must be taken in all the circumstances of the workplace to protect the health and safety of all workers. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation requires every employer to prepare a written health and safety policy for that workplace and to develop and maintain a program to implement that policy. One of your tasks as a supervisor is to put that program into action. Following are 5 duties that teach you how to put that program into action. 1. Know the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation as it applies to your specific work and workplace. A supervisor who knows and understands the Manitoba Act and Regulation can make sure workers follow the law and can identify ways to make your workplace safer. The various regulations and act contain detailed requirements about how to make the workplace you supervise safe. For example, several regulations, such as Section 35, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, WHMIS, explain what workers need in order to work safely with chemical and other hazardous materials or designated substances. Things like training, warning labels on products, and information sheets. The same is true for Section 14, Fall Protection, and Section 22, Powered Mobile Equipment, and many others. There are also regulations that specify requirements for different types of workplaces, such as construction projects, healthcare facilities, industrial establishments, and mines. Number 2, make sure your workers wear and use the right personal protective equipment, PPE. Your employer is responsible for telling you what types of protective equipment, devices, or clothing they require workers to use or wear. And both of you are responsible for making sure the workers are using or wearing what is required by the Act and regulation, as well as the company health and safety manual. That means you need to know and understand the requirements in the Act and its regulations about equipment, devices, and clothing, as well as your employer's health and safety policy program and work procedures. Number 3, tell your workers about the hazards in their work. Every workplace has hazards. Hazards include anything in the workplace that can hurt workers or make them sick. A supervisor must know and be able to explain the actual and potential dangers involved in the work he or she is supervising and ensure that the workers do their work safely. A few regulations even say that you have to give written instructions to tell the workers what steps and procedures must be followed to stay safe. You need to know about these regulations if they apply to the work you are supervising. Your general duties as a supervisor also apply to the prevention of workplace violence. Number 4, plan the work so that it can be done safely. The people you supervise are relying on your knowledge and experience of the work to make sure it's done safely. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act requires employers to make sure you have the necessary competence to be a supervisor. Later, we will look at this responsibility in more detail. Number 5, make sure your workers know and follow through on their health and safety duties. It's your job to monitor the work, to remind workers of their health and safety duties if necessary, to show them how to work safely, and to enforce the employer's workplace health and safety policies and procedures if they are not being followed. Doing these 5 things will help you carry out your duties under the Manitoba Act and regulation. To make sure you are doing your job right, here are a few important questions you should ask yourself. Do I understand the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and the regulations that apply to the work we do? Can I explain those sections of the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and the regulations to the workers? Am I informing the workers about hazards? Have I planned the work so that it can be done safely? Am I making sure the workers wear or use the protective gear, clothing, and devices as required by the employer? Am I responding to and documenting problems that the workers are bringing to my attention? Am I making sure equipment is operating properly? Am I keeping an eye on work and showing how to do it properly and safely? Am I keeping my eyes open to any new hazards that may come up? Duties of the employer and the worker. As you can see, a supervisor has a lot of serious responsibilities. To carry out those responsibilities, you need the help of your employer and the people you supervise. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act gives duties to employers and workers that will help you do your job. The Workplace Safety and Health Act says it's the employer's duty to appoint a competent person as a supervisor. Be a person who 1. Is competent because of knowledge, training, and experience to ensure that work is performed in a safe manner, and number 2. Is familiar with this act and the regulations that apply to the work being performed at the workplace. Your employer must ensure that you are competent before you start supervising other workers. This includes ensuring that you know the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and the regulations that apply to the work you are supervising. You must also know about any potential or actual dangers to the health and safety of the workers you have charge over. If your workplace is a small one, and the supervisor and employer are the same person, then that one person must comply with both employer and supervisor duties. Here are some other things that the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act says the employer must do. Where there are more than 5 workers regularly employed in the workplace, create and review a health and safety policy every 3 years or more often as the circumstances at the workplace change which pose a risk of health and safety to workers at the workplace. Develop a program to implement that policy. Post the policy in the workplace. For all workplaces, make sure workers and supervisors know about hazards in the work they do and provide them with information, instruction, and supervision to protect their health and safety. Take steps to eliminate hazards in the workplace and where elimination is not possible, to control them. Make sure workers use and wear protective equipment, material, and devices where required by the regulations. Do everything reasonable in the circumstances to protect workers from being hurt or getting a work-related illness. In construction, it's important to know that the constructor or owner of the project also has duties to keep the workplace safe. This means that on a construction site, the constructor and your employer both have distinct responsibilities under the law. Sometimes the constructor is also your employer, in which case that one person must comply with both constructor and employer duties. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation also gives workers certain duties that support your role as a supervisor. Workers are obligated to follow the law and workplace health and safety policies and procedures. Workers are obligated to use and wear the personal protective equipment required by the employer. Workers are obligated to work and act in a way that will not hurt themselves or anyone else. If workers see anything that is unsafe or that goes against the act, they must tell you or the employer about it, so that you can take the necessary steps with your employer to solve the problem. Workers are responsible to report the absence of, or any defect in, all equipment or protective devices of which they become aware to either you or the employer. They may also report to the worker health and safety representative in the absence of an immediate supervisor or employer. As a supervisor, you can make a difference in your workplace, but you cannot do it alone. You need your employer and the workers you supervise to do their part to keep the workplace a safe place. Like you, they need to be aware of their health and safety duties under the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation. That's the first step in creating an effective internal responsibility system. Prevention starts here, but it does not end here. Section 1 Quiz. True or false? A few seconds are given after each question. Number 1. The supervisor only has one duty to fulfill. Take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances to protect workers. True or false? What do you think? False. There were 5 duties mentioned. Number 2. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act requires the employer to appoint a competent person as a supervisor. By competent person, the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act means that a supervisor must, among other things, have the necessary knowledge, training, and experience to carry out his or her duties. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 3. As a supervisor, you have the greatest responsibility for health and safety in your workplace. True or false? What do you think? False. The employer does, but supervisors are next in line and then workers. Number 4. New and young workers need a supervisor's special attention and guidance, especially during their first few weeks on the job. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 5. If workers see something unsafe, they should take matters in their own hands and solve the problem. True or false? What do you think? False. They should report it to the employer or their immediate supervisor or worker safety representative if the supervisor is unavailable. Step 2. Lead the way. Teamwork and the internal responsibility system. People in successful workplaces understand that a safe and healthy workplace is a productive workplace. They also know that they have to work together to create and maintain a safe and healthy workplace. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act is very clear about the different roles of the employer, supervisor, and worker, and how those roles cooperate to make a safe and healthy workplace. This is the Internal Responsibility System, or IRS as it is commonly known. Communication is a big part of the IRS in any workplace, and the ability to communicate effectively is an important skill for any supervisor. To communicate effectively, you need to be good at both listening and speaking. You need to be a leader as well as a supervisor. A leader adds to the supervisor's basic role of overseeing the work by listening to the workers, trying to understand their point of view, supporting them when they need help, and always setting a good example. As the person in the highest leadership position, the employer has the most important role in creating an effective internal responsibility system in the workplace. You need the support of the employer to carry out your supervisor duties, and the workers need to know that their supervisor and employer will listen to their concerns and work with them to recognize, assess, and control hazards. In fact, the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act says workers have the legal right to expect that support. You should inform the employer of any health and safety concern, even if you have the ability and authority to handle it yourself. Your employer may need to know about the problem in order to fulfill his or her duties. Manitoba workers have 4 legislated rights in the workplace. The internal responsibility system begins and functions by communicating the following 4 legislated rights to workers and working through these items with them. Number 1, the right to refuse work that is unsafe. Number 2, the right to know about hazards that they may encounter during the course of doing the work assigned to them. Number 3, the right to participate in their own safety and health. And number 4, the right to be free of discrimination for exercising these legislated rights. As a supervisor, it is important that you know and understand these 4 worker rights. They are at the heart of the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and Regulation, as well as the Internal Responsibility System. They connect directly to your duties as a supervisor and those of the employer. The right to refuse work that is unsafe. Workers have the right to refuse to do work that they have reason to believe is unsafe for them or another worker. As a supervisor, you respect that right by taking every precaution reasonable in the circumstances to protect workers and by complying with the process for work refusals specified in the Act. When a worker tells you that they are refusing to do particular work because it is likely to endanger them, you must look into the worker's concerns and do everything you can to help the employer address them. Most of the time, the employer or you will be able to solve the problem with the worker's health and safety representative. A system for this process is in place and included in the safety manual as well as posted on all bulletin boards. While mentioned first, it should be the last line of defense the worker would need to resort to when it comes to safety on any job. Where an atmosphere of respect between employer, supervisor, and workers exists, workers will seek help before refusing any work. Number 2, the right to know about hazards that they may encounter during the course of doing work assigned to them. It is your job as the supervisor to tell the workers about any health or safety hazards and to show them how to work safely. This supports workers' rights to know about the hazards to which they might be exposed. For example, the law says workers have to receive information and training on the chemicals or hazardous materials that are used, handled, or stored at work. This information is available either on warning labels or SDS sheets. Sometimes you may also have to give the worker written instructions on how to do the work by creating a safe work practice or procedure. The employer supports the workers' rights to know about making sure they get Number 1, information about the hazards in the work they are doing. 2, training to do the work in a healthy and safe way. 3, competent supervision to stay healthy and safe. That means the employer has made sure that you know how to do your job. Number 3, the right to participate in their own safety and health. As a supervisor, you support the workers' right to participate in health and safety by encouraging them to get involved. There are various ways to be involved in workplace health and safety, such as asking questions, raising concerns, and giving positive feedback. One of the most effective ways workers can participate in health and safety is by becoming a worker health and safety representative or a joint health and safety committee member. An atmosphere of cooperative communication is the key. Working together to identify hazards through hazard assessments and control measures will ensure buy-in on every level of the organization. Number 4, the right to be free of discrimination for exercising these legislated rights. By law, no worker can be discriminated against for exercising their legislated rights. Freedom to exercise those rights works to create a safety culture in every workplace, making the workplace a safe place. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulation duties for each person support a strong internal responsibility system in the workplace. Different people have different roles or positions, but they all have the same goal. As a supervisor, you can be a leader in making your workplace safer and healthier, but you cannot do it alone. Section 2 quiz. True or false? A few seconds are given after each question. 1. The effectiveness of the IRS in any workplace depends on how effectively the employer, supervisor, and workers cooperate to make a safe and healthy workplace. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 2. As a supervisor, you alone are responsible for making sure the workers you supervise are safe. True or false? What do you think? False. The employer is primary and the supervisor is next. Number 3. The 4 basic rights of employees are the right to refuse, the right to know, the right to participate, and the right to be free from discrimination for exercising one's rights. True or false? What do you think? True. 4. As a supervisor, those same rights apply to you. True or false? What do you think? True. 5. The main purpose of the duties and rights of the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act is to create a safer and healthier workplace. True or false? What do you think? True. Step 3. The Supervisor's Toolkit. Know the hazards in your workplace. One of your jobs as a supervisor is to help plan and organize the work and the workers. This is a big job. To do it well, you need to understand the work and their hazards associated with it. You also need to know how to eliminate or control those hazards and make sure the health and safety program implemented in your workplace is effective in doing so. At the root of every work-related death, injury, or sickness is a hazard of some kind. Hazards can take many forms. Sometimes more than one hazard can combine to make an even bigger hazard. Here are some of the most common hazards in workplaces. Repeating the same movements over and over, especially if you are in an awkward position or you use a lot of force. Think of someone who bends down all day or someone who lifts heavy things over and over again. Slipping, tripping, or falling. Think of something as simple as spilled coffee on the floor, a cluttered work area, or a raised platform with no guardrails. Motorized vehicles. Think of being hit by a dump truck that is backing up on a construction site, or someone getting hit by a forklift truck in a warehouse or on a loading dock. Using or working near machinery. Many workers have been killed or seriously injured by the equipment they were operating. Workplace violence. Chemicals, dusts, fumes. Long-term exposure to agents that can cause illness years later. Poor lighting. Unlocked energy sources. Sharp objects or equipment. Confined spaces. Allied processes, welding. Loud noises. One of the employer's duties is to make sure that every supervisor knows enough and has the experience and necessary training to keep workers safe. As previously discussed, one of the supervisor's duties is to inform workers of health and safety hazards. If a worker sees a hazard or practice that is in violation of the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulation, or workplace health and safety policies or procedures, that worker has a duty to tell their supervisor or employer. This should be done as soon as possible so that the hazard can be assessed and controlled and employees can be informed and trained. That is how employers, supervisors, and workers come together to make the workplace safer. This is an example of the internal responsibility system in action. Dealing with hazards. RACE is a commonly used process for dealing with hazards. RACE stands for Recognize, Assess, Control, and Evaluate. These steps, when done in order, help the supervisor identify and control hazards. Supervisors are encouraged to communicate with workers, the employer, and the Joint Health and Safety Committee or Worker Health and Safety Representative throughout this type of process. The RACE process is one good way to get a close look at the work and the hazards associated with it. You are always keeping your eyes and ears open for hazards. You pay attention to the way people are doing their work and you listen to their concerns. While very detailed, another commonly used format is the Field Level Hazard Assessment. The Construction Safety Association of Manitoba, CSAM, provides the popular safety hit list and is the preferred format of Wiebe's steel structures. This document includes a pre-start checklist, hazard, inspection checklist, including a section on categorizing hazards, and a section for toolbox talks. The supervisor shall ensure that all pertinent information be included on this form, such as what the hit list is used for on any given day, whether hazard assessment, inspection, or toolbox talk, or all of these items. The blanks given throughout the form must also be completed, giving detail as to who did what and when. All critical tasks must be noted as such in the Identified Hazards box and ranked accordingly. Handling problems as they arise. The race process, field level hazard assessment, or the CSAM hit list are ways to help you as the supervisor deal with hazards, but they are not everything. You also need to monitor the work. This means that you need to take steps to make sure the workers understand the information you give them and are following the workplace safety procedures and using or wearing their personal protective equipment. If you see a worker exposed to a hazard or causing a hazard by unsafe work practices, it's your job to talk to them about it. You have to make sure the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and any applicable regulations and the workplace safety procedures are being followed, and you have to enforce those procedures. If you find a hazard, you know that you need to do something about it. Use your experience and the information and training you got from your employer to help you make decisions on what to do. If you don't know how to deal with the hazard, talk to your employer. You can involve the Worker Health and Safety Representative or Safety Committee. Referring to external sources such as legislation, standards, codes, or expert consultants can help you solve the problem. The CSAM, WorkSafe Manitoba, and Workers' Compensation Board websites have a great many resources to draw from. If necessary, you may need to stop the work with the hazards from continuing and reassign workers until you know it's safe to proceed. If someone comes to you with a health and safety concern or to report a close call, you need to listen to them because these are warning signs of potentially serious problems ahead. You also need to inform your employer of these concerns. If you can solve a problem on your own or with the worker, you should. If you need help, you should ask your employer. Reports from workplace inspections by health and safety representatives, along with incident investigations done internally or by the Ministry of Labor, are important tools in your supervisor's toolkit. When they are used effectively, they help to control hazards and prevent injuries. Do you know what to do when things go wrong? Practical steps when an accident occurs. 1. Make sure the injured worker gets the necessary first aid and/or professional medical attention. 2. Inform the employer of the incident so that the Ministry of Labor and other related parties can be notified. 3. Secure the incident scene to prevent any further injuries and to help with the investigation of the incident. 4. Participate with the Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative in the investigation of the incident. As you can see, there is definitely a lot to know when you are a supervisor. It's an important role, and if you don't carry out the duties that are assigned to you by the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act, you can face consequences. For example, a Ministry of Labor inspector could issue an order against you. Also, you could be charged with an offense and fined. This is serious work, and it may seem overwhelming at first, but you don't have to do it alone. It will be equally important to make sure that all required documentation is completed, filed, and forwarded to Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health and all other required parties. The supervisor is required to be involved in ensuring due diligence on all levels. Section 3 quiz. True or false? A few seconds are given after each question. Number 1. To help you plan and organize work, you need to understand the hazards associated with it. You also need to know how to eliminate or control those hazards. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 2. Some workplace hazards, such as chemicals, dust, and germ, can cause sickness in a worker months or even years after being exposed to the hazard. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 3. If you recognize and assess the hazards in your workplace, you have done everything you need to do as a supervisor to keep the workers safe. True or false? What do you think? False. Hazards must also be controlled or eliminated. Number 4. If you find a hazard or a worker reports one to you, you are the one person in the workplace who is responsible for fixing it. True or false? What do you think? False. The employer and coworkers can also be involved. 5. If someone you supervise has been injured, the first thing you need to do is to inform the employer so that the necessary authorities can be notified. True or false? What do you think? False. Ensure first aid is administered and 911 is called. Step 4. You are not alone. Getting the help you need. Many supervisors are promoted to that position because they were good at their previous job. They learned as much as they could about that job, the hazards involved, and how to do their work in a safe and healthy way. But they may not be too sure about what's involved in the work of a supervisor. Now that they are a supervisor, their duties have changed. Do they know everything they need to know about this new role? That's the question you should ask yourself. You may know a bit about the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and the various regulations that are attached to it, but do you know enough about the specific requirements in the Act and about which of its regulations apply to your workplace? You may have the necessary experience in the work you are being called upon to supervise, but do you know enough about what's actually involved in supervising workers to do the job competently? In Section 1, we learned what it means to be considered a competent person. A competent person is competent because of knowledge, training, and experience to ensure that work is performed in a safe manner and is familiar with this act and the regulations that apply to the work being performed at the workplace. We have reviewed various duties of the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act assigned to you as a supervisor. If you feel that you don't have the necessary knowledge, training, and experience to carry out those duties, it's important that you talk to the employer. Communicate with your employer that you need more information and training in certain areas to do your job as a supervisor. Maybe you need to learn more about how to recognize, assess, and control hazards and to evaluate the hazard controls, about how to develop your listening skills, and about what the workers need from a competent supervisor. Even when you have the necessary knowledge, training, and experience to be a competent supervisor, fixing a health and safety problem will sometimes be out of your control. Maybe it's a hazard that affects the whole staff, or it might cost a lot of money to fix, and you may not be able to approve that expense. When these things happen, you need to let your employer know that you need help with solving the problem. Bring the ideas you got from the workers and from the health and safety representative or committee. Together, you can figure out the best way to eliminate or control the hazard. The workers need to know that you will do what's right for them, and you need to know that the employer will do what's right for everyone. The Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act supports a coordinated approach to workplace health and safety by giving everybody duties according to their position at the workplace. The higher your position is, the more duties you have. When you put all of these duties together, you get a strong IRS in the workplace, where you can go for help. Getting help inside your workplace. Sometimes a worker will come to you with a question and you just don't know the answer. Be creative in finding solutions and don't throw your hands up in frustration and quit. You can find solutions to health and safety issues in the company health and safety manual required to be on each job site or workplace. Safe work procedures and safe work practices are valid resources to solve problems. Safety data sheets that come with hazardous materials also have pertinent information regarding safety and health concerns. The operator's manual for equipment workers use. If unavailable on site, many may be downloaded from manufacturers' websites and already have many solutions under troubleshooting. Similar problems may have been resolved previously through safety meetings, and meeting minutes may contain solutions. Inspection and incident reports may also contain the solutions you are looking for. Getting help outside your workplace. Safe Work Manitoba, Workers' Compensation Board, Construction Safety Association of Manitoba, Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. These organizations are there to help you fulfill your responsibilities and comply with due diligence. When you are unsure about what to do in a given situation and need written guidelines or advice, these are resources that can provide keen insight and solutions that will meet legislated regulation, helping you keep everyone safe. To be a good supervisor, you have to do more than just know things. You have to put what you know into action. Section 4 quiz. True or false? A few seconds are given after each question. To be a competent supervisor, it's good enough to know that the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act exists and that various regulations are attached to the Act. True or false? What do you think? False. You need to know and understand applications and enforce compliance where you are responsible. Number 2. If fixing a health and safety issue is out of your control for any reason, you need to bring the problem to the employer. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 3. The company health and safety program and procedures, safety data sheets, inspection and incident reports are all good sources for answers to health and safety questions posed by workers or supervisors. True or false? What do you think? True. That is why they exist. 4. The Ministry of Labour only exists for the purpose of inspecting workplaces and enforcing the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulation. True or false? What do you think? False. They are there to help find solutions and give direction. They are a wealth of information. Step 5. Be a good role model. Sending the right message the right way. Telling people to work in a safe and healthy way is not all there is to being a supervisor. Sometimes people want to take shortcuts because they think it will help them get the job done faster. Sometimes they are tired or having a bad day, and there will be days when you are tired and having a bad day as well. But you need to be a role model for safety at all times. One's bad attitude should never be considered just cause to neglect working safely. As a supervisor, you need to follow the workplace safety procedures, wear your personal protective equipment, and stay safe. If you don't do these things, others will follow your lead and think it's okay to not follow the workplace safety procedures. Workers are watching you and learning from what you do or don't do. How you supervise the work, the way you think and talk about the work, can affect the safety of the people you supervise. You want to help the workers choose the safe path every time. You can help them by being easy to talk to and answering their questions. But the best thing you can do is to practice what you preach. That means always complying with the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulation and follow healthy and safe work practices in your workplace. It means explaining how to work safely and correcting unsafe work situations whenever you see them. If you walk by a worker who isn't following the correct procedure or using the right safety gear and you do nothing about it, what message are you sending to that worker and everyone else? The message you send if you ignore health and safety infractions is that safety doesn't really matter. That's not the message you want to send, and it's not the message the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act expects you to send. As we saw earlier, the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act supports a coordinated approach to workplace health and safety. To be part of this, you have to understand your legal obligations and put what you know into action. So does everyone else in the workplace. That's how the internal responsibility system works. If the employer knows about a hazard and doesn't take steps to eliminate or control it, as well as make sure the workers are told about it and how to deal with it, that employer is not doing what the law requires. If the supervisor knows about a hazard and doesn't explain to the workers how to deal with it, that supervisor is not doing what the law requires. If the worker knows about a hazard and doesn't report it to the supervisor or the employer, that worker is not doing what the law requires. The internal responsibility system is all about people cooperating to recognize, assess, and control hazards in the workplace and to evaluate hazards. Every supervisor has a key role to play in that system. Remember, when you started a new job and felt a bit overwhelmed by all the things you didn't know? Remember that one person, a supervisor or a coworker, who took the time to show you the ropes? They showed you what was safe and what was unsafe, while teaching you the skills you would need to do the job you were hired for. They gave you useful tips and kept you out of harm's way until you learned what you needed to know for yourself and gain adequate experience under their training before you worked without them. We can all think of someone who helped us settle into a new job. Now you are the supervisor and are the person with the know-how and experience. If you don't feel that you know enough to carry out your health and safety duties as a supervisor, it's important that you talk to your employer and make sure you get the information you need. Did you know young workers are more likely to rely on their immediate supervisor for health and safety training and direction than older, more experienced workers? Supervisors often put young workers at risk by giving them the most boring and dangerous work. Keep an eye on the new worker and everyone else you supervise. Some will ask questions about what may seem obvious to you. Even those who don't ask you questions are counting on you to show them the right way to do the work they were hired to do. And, at the end of the day, the only dumb question a new or young worker could ask is one that should have been asked, but wasn't, and resulted in an injury or worse. As a supervisor deemed to be competent by your employer, you are responsible under his direction to ensure those under your supervision are trained and in compliance with the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulation, as well as your employer's safety and health policies. By always showing your commitment to health and safety, the people you supervise will follow your example. Prevention starts here, but it doesn't end here. Do you know what the characteristics of young workers are? Following are characteristics associated with young workers and may be contributing factors in young worker-related workplace injuries. Young workers often are convinced of their own invulnerability and believe that nothing bad could ever happen to them, are reluctant to ask questions for fear of appearing ignorant or stupid, are often tired from juggling other responsibilities such as school and homework, and are sometimes distracted about other things going on in their lives such as family and social life. Accept physically demanding or dangerous tasks as part of their job. feel rushed to get things done, may choose to not wear safety equipment because they think it's not cool. Section 5 quiz, true or false. A few seconds are given after each question. Number 1. How you think and talk about the work you are supervising can affect the safety of the people you supervise. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 2. Good supervisors are good role models. Good role models practice what they preach by following the workplace health and safety policies and procedures. True or false? What do you think? True. Number 3. Workers who ask a lot of questions can take up a lot of your time, so you should keep talking to them to a minimum. True or false? What do you think? False. You should be considered easy to talk to and easily approachable by those to whom you provide supervision. The only dumb question is one that was not asked but should have been. Sections 1 to 5 review. Step 1. Make a difference. The supervisor position is vitally important to the IRS and due diligence. There are duties and responsibilities to understand and practice. Make sure you are up to the legislative demands of the supervisor position. Step 2. Lead the way. Communicate and cooperate with your employer and those workers under your supervision. Understand how rights and responsibilities work together for a safe workplace. Step 3. The Supervisor's Toolkit. Use the resources at your disposal to ensure a safe workplace and do what is needed to make it better than it is now. Step 4. You are not alone. Use the help from inside your workplace, such as the structure of the IRS and internal documentation practices to comply with the employer's safety policy. Use help from outside your workplace, such as official government or safety association helps provided online. Use owner's manuals of the tools and equipment your employer provides to workers for safe work practices and procedures. Step 5. Be a role model. Send the right message by following the Manitoba Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulation, as well as your employer's health and safety policy. Be approachable to your employer as well as those you supervise.